Well, there's obviously quite a few reasons why bees are really important, but probably the big thing that is in the news a lot is about our food security. And without bees pollinating, we wouldn't get a lot of the really important fruits and vegetables and other foods that we eat. It's the kids that go back when they get so excited about learning about bees and pollinators. They're, they're the ones that go home and talk to their parents about it. So they're disseminating all the information to their
Yeah.
families. And I think, yeah, that's contagious then for their families. And their families start talking about, well, why are bees important for the environment?
I think that reverse role modeling is so important though as well,
Yeah.
that young kids become the advocates for the important things that are going on now in terms of both environmental science, the connection to the world around us, to sustainability, that they're the ones that are turning to their grandparents and to their parents and going, no, no, we can't do that.
Welcome to the Life Rocks podcast. In this podcast, we explore how nature, science, education, and culture can benefit all children and future generations. This is a show for educators, parents, mentors, and anyone interested in making the lives of our children, families, and communities better. So sit back, take a breath, and enjoy the show. And now for your host, Asher Cloran.
Hello and welcome to the Life Rocks podcast. Today we have some very special guests, friends with honey. Helen and Benny are with us on the show to share their passion for teaching with bees and connecting that to childhood through song, education about sustainability, earth sciences, all the things we're into at the Life Rocks podcast. Helen's mission is to transform perceptions about bees, emphasizing their vital role in our ecosystems and providing an educational gateway to understanding nature's intricate connections. Helen's teamed up with Benny to bring it all to life and write and record an album for bees, a bee-themed children's song, and produce Friends with Honey musical kids show. Weaving storytelling and singing and dancing, the show features songs from the album and valuable messages about helping our friends with the bees and our precious planet. So today, Helen and Benny have come to share their passion for educating through creativity, and all of this exemplifies so many of the things that we're into at Life Rocks. So welcome, Helen and Benny. Thanks for coming to the show.
Hello.
Thanks, Asher. Good to meet you, mate.
Yeah.
So, as it is with most of our guests, they're all passionate nature lovers, and they're out here educating or uncovering mysteries of science or helping nature or helping childhood. I want to hear a little bit from both of you guys. Why are you doing the work that you do today, and what was the backstory for you guys? Maybe starting with Helen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have always had a passion for insects and all the critters. But where I really came connected to bees was I had some family in Canada who were commercial beekeepers. And I
Okay.
think listening to the stories about beekeeping sort of got me hooked at the beginning. I did a lot of travel throughout my 20s and 30s, traveled all around the world working in sustainable tourism. Essentially, my background is sustainable tourism. But when I came to Australia and sort of put my roots down a little bit more, I decided, okay, I'm going to start beekeeping now. And so I got my first beehive and I was pretty much hooked from there. But, a lot of people started talking to me about, oh, can I have some honey? And the bees were very much sort of people connecting with the honey side of things.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to tell the story that bees are about so much more than honey and how important they are for our planet. I guess that was what gave me the inspiration to start Friends with Honey, just wanting to get out there and tell this story about how important bees are for our food security. I had been doing a project for Parks Victoria, And it was a program to basically engage more volunteers in environmental volunteering. I put together a series of 8 workshops, and there was a whole lot of different ones, everything from how to grow plants from cuttings. There was
Yep.
how to identify Indigenous plants. And then I put together a workshop called Bee for Biodiversity. And
Great.
I set the venue. The venue was Herring Island, which is a beautiful little spot.
Oh, where's that?
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's in the middle of the Yarra River, and you can get
Oh.
there with this little boat that Parks Victoria runs. And anyway, I went
Beautiful.
out there, and they've got this gorgeous little art gallery there. And I bought all my beekeeping equipment and everything from the honey spinner through to the beekeeping suits. And we set it up in this little art gallery on Herring Island. And that was when I
Awesome.
my third script. And when I was putting together the program, I called it Bee for Biodiversity because I really wanted to sort of emphasize the connection between bees, biodiversity, food security, all those really important things. I also wanted to give a historical context of how a lot of the bees that people associate with the European honeybees, but we have so many more different bee species in Australia.
Yes.
So
Thousands.
this program, like over 2,000 different species. So this program that I ran on Herring Island, everybody loved it. And I had everything from young kids right through to grandparents as the audience. I was sort of thinking, that's going to be a bit of a challenging audience, but there was so much interest across all the generations. And then that sort of led me after that. We took the boat back across from Herring Island and, drove home, and it was like, I really want to do this again. And, when you do something for the first time and as soon as you've done it, you might have been a bit nervous about it for the first time that you present. But I was like, I just cannot wait for the next time that I get to do this. And so that was really what gave me the inspiration for starting Friends with Honey.
Far out. And it's pretty much that love for beekeeping.
With the beekeeping, yeah, absolutely. I think for me, though, a lot of the way that I practice beekeeping is not all about taking honey from the bees. A lot of it is all about the pollination services that the bees provide. So we have 45 acres of rural conservation land in regional Victoria, which we're the custodians of. It's a beautiful little piece of paradise in the Pyrenees Shire of Victoria, and that's where we keep the majority of our bees. And it's really great because, we got fruit trees there and the bees pollinate the trees. And so a lot of the time it's not necessarily about the honey side of things, but it's what bees are doing to pollinate and all the ecological services that they provide.
Exactly. And I think obviously bees have the association with honey, but for people out there who are wondering, what are all the roles that bees play outside of creating this delicious thing called honey? There's so many other elements that the bee is providing to the ecosystem that go unseen, and it's not just food production either. So if you'd like to outline a few of those areas that caught your attention where you're like, wow, I've got to bring this information to the world. Bees aren't just about honey.
Yeah, well, then I think probably one of the big things that I emphasize, particularly when I'm talking to young children, but I also re-emphasize this to adults, is biodiversity. And I really make an effort to get kids to understand what biodiversity actually means. So I usually start asking them the question, what do you think biodiversity is? And then I ask kids, do you think that humans are part of biodiversity? And sometimes they sort of think, am I part of the ecosystem? And so obviously the answer to that is yes, human beings are part of the ecosystem and they can do positive things for the ecosystem, but they can also do things that are really harmful to the ecosystem. So I always like to start with biodiversity, and then I then go into pollination, right?
Okay.
And so of course, through pollination is what makes a lot of flowering plants grow and reproduce, produce seeds and fruits, which are good for our food security, but also great for biodiversity because, if the plants are growing and there's all these different species of plants, then we have a rich and diverse ecosystem. So that side of biodiversity is something that I really like to focus on. So it gives people that sort of overall understanding. And of course,
The perspective.
beekeepers have a huge responsibility to create biodiverse ecosystems. And this isn't obviously just for European honeybees who go out and pollinate a lot of the monoculture crops that we produce, but for our native Australian bees, a lot of them have co-evolved with the plants here. And so without the bee, the plant can't grow. Without the plant, the bee can't have a habitat and a food source. It's all about those connections. But the very start of that, always for me, is the biodiversity equation and getting people to understand what is biodiversity and what they can do to create biodiverse ecosystems in their own backyard and in the world.
That's a really interesting point that you made there, that certain plants co-evolve to have a certain species of bee, or maybe a certain group of plants or a certain collection of plants within a climate. Do you have any examples of that that you could speak to? Because I think that, yes, the European bees are out there pollinating crops that we know and love and eat as food
Yes.
sources. But then you've got all these other plants that provide the biodiversity of life out there, that have these connections with insects that aren't like popular or like apparently relevant to our life, but they really, really are. I'd love
Yes.
to hear more.
Yeah. Well, I think it's that as well. So quite often when I go and do talks as well, I will give people like a very basic insect identification lesson to say, well, in Australia, we've got over 2,000 different species of native bees, but we've also got 7,500 different species of flies and 14,500 different species of wasps, because quite often people can't really tell the differences between them. And then once you empower them to understand a few really basic differences between these pollinating insects and the connections between these pollinating insects, then they start to go, oh, we need to have a rich and biodiverse ecosystems because this is what makes our planet healthy. Like giving a little bit of education on those side of things. And, I was out on the weekend talking to a group of 7 to 10-year-olds, and I started by giving them an apple and explaining that 1 in every 3 bites of food that we eat depends on bees pollinating. And this apple that I'm going to give you is because a bee has pollinated an apple flower that's then grown into an apple fruit, and you guys get to eat it. So, and then after that, one of the kids, we've spoken about, other pollinating insects, and one of them was flies. And then this kid had his apple core, and he then said, without the flies, this apple core could just be rotting matter. And I said, yeah, that's true. If we didn't have flies, we'd be surrounded by rotting matter. And so it's just that kind of things that the light bulb goes in kids' heads, and they're like, yeah, now I understand the connection. So yeah, I think that you can't talk about bees in isolation. You really have to talk about them as part of this complex ecosystem and this web that happens. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, I love that approach. And I think pointing out the little bits of this world with the detail that comes through earth science, understanding a little bit of insect anatomy, or which plants, need specific insects because of how the certain plant's designed. That sort of thing makes the world stand out. And it's not just a buzzard or a flying gnat or some sort of derogatory insect term, like, get it away from me. It's like, oh, what is it? We bring it a bit closer through having that curiosity lens that we're cultivating, rather than like the pest lens, which has sort of been, is it going to provide food for us, or is it a pest? It's sort of like not much in between. So
Yes.
biodiversity is the stuff that's in between. How about you, Benny? I want to hear from you. What turns you on about bees? Family friendly show.
I love that, mate. Look,
What
I've
gives you the
always been-
buzz? It's all about the buzz with the bees.
Pun intended. Look, I've always been an outdoor sort of person. I've grew up in the Scouts and going hiking, and always have been connected with the outdoors and with nature. And so because of that connection to the environment, I think Helen and I had a lot of discussions based on the world around us and what we
Yeah.
can do to try and make things a better place. The obvious passion that Helen has to do with bees and pollination and the education that she's providing, it's quite contagious.
Mm.
And so you can't help but be sort of brought along for the ride. And that's sort of what happened in that regard, where she was just connecting with these kids and with adults as well at some of the council workshops and things that she runs. I was then just realizing that this is important work. This is some really great stuff. And I just want to be involved in trying to help out.
Awesome. So Helen's running amazing workshops for bees, incursions in schools for different age groups. What are some of the age groups that you approach with these incursions, and how might you say to a teacher out there, what are the elements that you'd introduce at different ages?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends on the child, obviously, but I generally break my incursions into the early education, which is everything from sort of 2.5 years through to about 7 years. And the program that I run for that age group is very interactive and includes games as well as singing and dancing, because that is a way that kids will really understand and learn things, is by playing games and
Interactive
having some
learning.
boxes. And then I sort of then break it into the next group, which is 7 years plus. And with that age group, it's very, very inquisitive. They love to ask questions. And one thing that I found with that age group is I could literally be in a room for over an hour and the kids could just ask me questions once you sort of get them started on this trajectory about, bees and why bees are important for the planet. And you start to ask one question, and then the kids then start to ask all questions of you. So there's sort of that. But then I found as well, I've done a lot of mixed age groups where I'll do a program and I've got 8 years right through to the grandparents that come along. I was a couple of
Beautiful.
weeks ago in Kerrang, and I love to go to regional Victoria. You get some really great sessions there where you get some people from farming communities and that side of things. And that age group, again, like I sort of have a basic presentation that I do, but it never runs the same way because it depends on what people are interested in. Some people are really interested in the food security side of things, and people love insect identification. Other people are really into the history of how the European honeybee came to Australia. Sometimes I develop my learning just through questions that people have asked me, because I always say to people, you never stop learning about bees and biodiversity. And so if I get a question that I don't know, I'm going to go and do my research and then find out, what the answer to that question is and get back to you. So
Absolutely.
sometimes one of the presentations that I've done have evolved through the questions that people have come to me with.
Great. Yeah, you've still got that curiosity for learning. You're not resting on your laurels, and there's more to learn about bees, I'm sure, all around the corner.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Life Rocks is not just a podcast. It is an education foundation centered around connecting children to the magic of nature through earth sciences. As a self-funded foundation and startup, we are constantly seeking support so that we can continue our great work. So if you feel called to donate to Life Rocks, please head down to the show notes and find the relevant donation link. We accept regular money as well as cryptocurrencies. We greatly appreciate you, our Life Rocks community. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's actually a saying in the world of beekeeping that if you ask 10 beekeepers in the room a question, you'll get at least 12 different answers.
Ah,
So everybody
great.
has different opinions on things, but yes.
Mm. Can you give us an example of some interesting contrasting opinions in the world of beekeeping? What's some of the goss?
There's all sorts, like from the type of hive that people are using.
Yep.
A really interesting one is I'm a member of the Victorian Apiarist Association, which is
Yep.
a fantastic group of beekeepers. Some beekeepers have been beekeeping for like 60 plus years, so you
Wow.
get a group of people who are really passionate about beekeeping. Obviously, everybody has different ways of doing things, but in one of our last meetings, the question was about when to pack down your beehives and how you pack down your beehives for winter.
And
We actually all sat in a circle and we all spoke about how we were going to pack our beehives down for winter. And of course, everybody had a slightly different way that they do it or a day of the year that they do it. Some people do it on Anzac Day. Some people wait. Some people don't pack their hives down at all, depending on where the location of their hives are. But one of the great things about joining a beekeeping club is that you are getting all these combined years of beekeeping experience and you're learning from people that really want to pass their knowledge on to you. So it's a fantastic community in that regard, that there's always stuff to learn and people always willing to give their knowledge.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think a beekeeping club sounds like exactly where you need to be to keep on learning about bees and
Yes.
being in a community of people who also share your values, which if you love bees, you probably love gardening. And if you love gardening, you probably realize that food is important and a lot of the environmental concerns. So there's all of these overlapping threads of community members who would be interested in bees. To our audience,
Yeah.
how
And one thing
just
that's really great is there's a huge library of resources, of books
mm,
about beekeeping that have been written over many, many years. So it's another really great reason for joining a beekeeping club.
okay. And do you see families coming through there and like people with kids and that sort of interest?
Yeah, absolutely. Kids of all different ages and everybody's welcome, which is really
Yeah,
good.
awesome. Yeah, to our audience out there, would you want to share a message of why you think bees are so important at this time?
Well, there's obviously quite a few reasons why bees are really important, but probably the big thing that is in the news a lot is about our food security. And without bees pollinating, we wouldn't get a lot of the really important fruits and vegetables and other foods that we eat. And some people don't connect how wide that range of food sources, right through to even some of the food that our animals eat, are a result of bees pollinating. And whilst not all crops are 100% reliant on bee pollination, so many crops will produce a much bigger yield if they are pollinated by bees. But aside from that, bees are really important for biodiversity. And Australia is one of the mega diverse countries of the world. And we need to be thinking about ways that we can help to encourage as much biodiversity as possible in Australia. And so the more that we learn, not just about European honeybees, but about all of our Australian native bees, the more we'll realize all these connections in nature and why we need to start creating more biodiverse environments to be healthy habitats for these pollinating creatures.
Awesome. Why you think citizen-based approach can come up with some of these solutions for the challenges we face in biodiversity and
Do you want to answer that one, Osh?
No, that's it.
Okay, so
Emily.
Alan, so I think citizen science is so powerful. So in a nutshell, citizen science is about ordinary people who don't necessarily have a scientific background to get involved in scientific research. And that can be everything from creating a hypothesis to going out and collecting the data that scientists use to make decisions about conservation and land management, right? And, anybody can be a citizen scientist. Now, from a biodiversity perspective and all the projects that are in that biodiversity area, it can involve people going out and recording the biodiversity in their own backyard. So we've just recently on the weekend was the City Nature Challenge, which involves just people going and recording urban biodiversity. And you might not think that urban areas are hotspots for biodiversity, but if you go into your backyard, you'll just realize the variety of different critters that there are in your own backyard. And so I think that by going out and getting people to start taking photographs and the incredible tool of AI that then can see the picture and tell you what it is, and then you start getting curious about what it is that you've just photographed. It could be that you photographed a praying mantis. And then you think, oh, I wonder why that praying mantis is in my backyard. The reason why is because there's stuff for it to eat. Praying mantis are opportunistic foragers, and they'll go out and change their diet depending on what's available in the environment sometimes. So it's just making these connections, and it's so simple to go out there and do it. And it's very, you can do it in your own time. So citizen science is fantastic in that regard. And there's lots of apps like iNaturalist that are very easy to use. Anybody can use them, but it connects you with a global community of people who are into nature and want to do good things for the environment. So I think that citizen science is a really, really powerful tool for community education, but also getting people involved in collecting important data that scientists can then use.
100%. That sounds like a really good summary of why citizen science is important. It's a way of engaging with our world, and then also a way of collecting the data and putting it back into the system. And it's something that a lot of children can feel purposeful, that they're making a contribution. And actually in those teenage years, if we're linking teenagers up with earth science that has a citizen science type of component, monitoring biodiversity in urban environments is a good example, or like going out to a local forest or a local creek and reporting on what's there, and write to the council about it and tell them, hey, we've got to clean this place up a bit, or whatever the little interim approaches might be after having collected some stuff like that. So have you been involved in that sort of thing for a while?
Yeah. And well, so I have. I ran a BioBlitz last year so a BioBlitz is a citizen science event where you go and record as much biodiversity as you can in a short period of time. So the City Nature Challenge is a BioBlitz in that it went for 4 days, and we were running a little workshop on the weekend actually at Blackburn Lake to teach people about citizen science and why it's important. And we were actually talking about how it's has this opportunity to really engage with young people.
The beauty of young people is that if you can make learning fun, they will just dive straight into it. And what we were talking about with the citizen science side of it, and using the iNaturalist app, which links into, was it the Australia?
The Atlas of Living Australia,
Australia, that you can turn it into a game with kids, where it's, let's go out and see how many of something we can capture, how many different creatures, who can get the most photos of different things. And it suddenly becomes this really powerful tool for capturing a lot of data and having a really motivated team of citizens to go out and do that. And, they can be 7 years old doing that, because if it's a game and it's fun, the kids will do it all day long. It almost becomes like a game of Pokemon Go or something like that they're doing, but in the real world with real creatures.
That's so great, guys. What role have you seen with parents or teachers who take on this knowledge about bees, and how that has changed or influenced their family or their classroom? Because at Life Rocks, we often think through the lens of role modeling, and that unless the adults around us are inspired, connected to nature, curious themselves, then how do we hope to influence the youth? And then also, it's our job to make it fun. Like Benny said, like we've got to make nature fun and presentable to children in a way that makes that engagement loop happen. And they do a lot of the work once the system is in place. So I'm just wondering how you've seen your information impact other role models, or how you guys think of the influence of role models in science
one of the most exciting things that I've seen has been when Helen delivers these early learning programs. At the end of each one, she gives them a little seedling, like
Yeah,
it's
just a
still
little seedling. It just popped up.
of a little sunflower, and
Yeah.
the kids in the class can then have this sunflower grow. But off the back of that, Helen's now returning to some of these centres and finding that they have been developing their own pollinator gardens and things like that. That
Great.
there has been more a buy-in from the educators at the centres that she's going to, where they're realising that the messaging that she's doing is important, and that they are then taking on some of that concept of, that if we have this all year round, we can be talking to the kids about it throughout the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, it's the kids that go back and when they get so excited about learning about bees and pollinators, they're the ones that go home and talk to their parents about it. So they're disseminating all the information to their
Yeah.
families. And I think, that's contagious then for their families, and their families start talking about, well, why are bees important for the environment?
They're pollinating.
Yes.
I think that reverse role modeling is so important though as well,
Yeah.
that young kids become the advocates for the important things that are going on now in terms of both environmental science, the connection to Earth, to the world around us, to sustainability, that they're the ones that are turning to their grandparents and to their parents and going, no, we can't do that. That's a bad thing. We're hurting the planet by doing that, because we've got this generation gap between what's understood to be the right thing to do and how it was always done. And, that reverse role modeling of the kids teaching the parents and the grandparents, I think is actually one of the most exciting things about when we do these programs with younger kids, that they're the ones that are going, bees aren't bad. The other pests in the garden aren't bad. Like we were all brought, growing up, wasps were bad, flies were bad. We got to get a tin of pesticide and spray everything. We knew the bees were good, but otherwise it was spray everything else, forgetting that the spray also hits the bees. And whereas now we have more information where the kids know this and they're the ones telling mum and dad, no, we've got to stop poisoning everything. We've got to plant flowers for the bees and create this better world from the ground up.
Beautifully said, Benny. That's really inspirational to hear how you're thinking about reverse role modeling, and that children who have big ideas and are able to see the truth of the world, they know it, they feel it, and they can spread that message. And their parents will listen. So that's really cool that you're seeing that happen. Well, in May, we have World Bee Day coming up. How are you guys getting ready for World Bee Day, and what's happening?
So what happened when Helen was doing all these programs with the kids and doing the early learning program? She realized really quickly that connecting with the kids with music was a great thing to do, to get their attention and to be able to teach them lessons in a fun way. But she was finding that some of the music that she had access to wasn't really meeting the standard of what she was after, both in messaging, but also in terms of the quality of some of the music that was bee themed and pollinator themed.
Yeah.
She turned to me, and I've got a background. I'm a country music singer. So I
that's
head
where
up
you
to
come in.
Tamworth every year and play in the
Right on.
festival and have got some music out in the world and all that sort of thing. And she said, do you think we could do something? And so we sat down together and wrote 7 songs all about bees and how, all the good things they do, whether it's pollination, whether it's the food security stuff, whether
Right.
it's about habitat, whether it's about native bees, all this sort of these different stories. I headed up to Sydney, sat down with my producer up there, and we recorded an album of 10 songs because we threw in a few covers as well that were going to be recognizable, and put that together as the Friends with Honey musical kids show album. And we've got that coming out into the world on the 17th of May, which is a couple of days before World Bee Day. But then we had this musical album. And it's great because the whole concept of recording it was so that Helen had a few songs that she could use during her programs. But then we realized that we had this resource and we put this thought into these songs about the messaging we were trying to get across, and thought we could take this a step further. And off the back of that, we then wrote a show based around the songs. So what started off as a 30-minute album turned into a 45-minute musical kids show where the kids and I go on an adventure to go visit Helen at her farm. I know nothing about bees. I make a few mistakes and get into some sticky situations, pun intended. And Helen educates me and the kids about what I might have wrong and what a good lesson is. And every time we learn something, it gives me an idea for a song. And then we sing to reinforce the message that we've just learned. We choreographed every song as well. So they're singing and dancing. And that's sort of how we came up with our little theme of sing, dance, learn for the Friends with Honey musical kids show. We've been lucky enough, we've been performing it throughout the Easter holidays at Melbourne's Luna Park. And just to be able to connect with these kids that had no idea we were going to be there at the end of it, they're coming up and they're wanting to ask Helen more questions about bees and learning so much. We're really excited that the Friends with Honey musical kids show, we're doing an album launch on the 18th of May at the RSPCA in Burwood East. They're down in Victoria. And then we're also starting to take bookings for both some regional shows and kinders and things like that, where we're going out and, getting the messaging across through singing, dancing.
Yeah. And we even have our own animated characters.
It's so fantastic what you guys have done, and there's so much effort and detail and such a journey and all of the complementary resources that you guys have.
So people can listen on Spotify or iTunes or YouTube or however they want to listen to their music. We've got CDs that are available for people that still like buying CDs. At the moment, the only show link that we've got on there is for the album launch. But as we start to do other shows and start to tour a little, we'll be putting those links on there as well. And we've got other plans as well. The whole universe is slowly growing, where we're now doing pre-production for the animated characters to turn each little story and each song into little cartoon episodes, so that again, we can connect with that storytelling. We can create children's books and things like that, where we can just keep reinforcing the messaging through different mediums, so that, the repetition, as we all know, is what helps to bed it in for the kids. Look, I think this has got to be one of the most exciting projects that I've ever been involved in, mate. And I think you can tell how excited I am about it. I've had a lot of fun doing country music and playing at shows in pubs and RSLs, but there's nothing like the connection and like the good that we're doing with these shows and with this music, and to sit there and go, we're doing stuff that can actually make a difference.
100%. I think it's so great what you guys are doing, and I love seeing the excitement flowing through you, Benny. If people are in Melbourne, they've got a homeschool group, they want to do a school holiday workshop, they might want to get you in for an event, they just head to friendswithhoney.kids as well?
Yep. Friendswithhoney.kids, or depending on if people are after a different style of workshop or incursion, friendswithhoney.com.au is Helen's other business website. Or you can just Google Friends with Honey. I think that comes up as a lot of things nowadays.
Yeah. We are going to have all the links posted for your show here, and get your Friends with Honey album. Head to a show if you can. It sounds like such an awesome experience for your family and for their kids and anyone who might want to learn more about honey.
Yes, we get the audience dancing like a bee during the show, that's for sure.
Bees have quite some moves, don't they? There's a whole dance that the bees do in part of their mating ritual, as well as the signals that they send to each other. Do you have some information about that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So they do a dance called the waggle dance. And basically, the waggle dance tells the bees the direction and distance of where the best flowers are in the neighborhood. So when one bee finds a good source of pollen and nectar on the flowers, it'll come back to the hive and it'll do this dance on the honeycomb, and the speed and direction that the bees dancing will then give directions to the other bees as to where to go and find the flowers. So, and we that's one of the songs that we do as part of the show. It's called Dance Like a Bee, and it's a
Right.
choreographed song, and the kids really get into it. They love it.
Awesome. Get them up and moving.
Absolutely, yes.
It sounds like your show is a real balance of elements of there's like movement, and then there's probably you get them singing along and learning a bit of cognitive stuff, like here's some facts, and then holistic thinking. So you're kind of mapping these different areas of development. Have you thought through that lens of childhood development in the development of your programs? Do you care to share a little bit of how you've thought about that?
Yeah, well, there's the musical journey side of things too, isn't it, Ben?
Yeah, so there was some thought went into it. And one of the big things about communicating to kids with song is there's no need to speak down to the kids. We don't have to oversimplify things. Kids are a lot more clever than sometimes they're given credit for. So we wanted to make sure that the language and the wording in the songs, it actually told the stories that were needed, and it gave that education. But then we realized as well that we had this opportunity not just to give them an education about bees and the environment, but also to give them a musical education. So of the 10 songs, we've gone for different styles and genres of music where, there's some sort of 90s boy band pop feel to Dance Like a Bee. We've got some country songs in there. We've got some that are a little bit more, I suppose, more like a children's song. But
Yeah.
we also had this really important thing of going, the songs need to sound like mum and dad are going to be happy to listen to it on repeat in the car, because we all know that's what happens. And we didn't want it to just be that we're repeating a catchphrase over and over to a xylophone or a recorder or something like that. It was really important to go, we want to make good music because kids deserve good music. They deserve good lyric and not to be spoken down to, and they
Yeah.
can enjoy a good hook and learn from that as much as anyone else.
Great. I love that. I love you haven't just created a crazy frog monster or a Hampton the hamster that is going to terrorize families everywhere till the end of time, and that you've got some good hooks, some meaningful hooks. Very nice.
Yeah.
And I like that, the different genres of music too, and exposing children to more knowledge and different ways of expressing it that, yeah, not putting them just, oh, that's just kiddie music, or having to talk down to them. And we're really believe in that in Life Rocks, in creating our resources where sometimes scientific subjects have technical language, photosynthesis or archaebacteria or algae filaments, these words. But sometimes you do need some of those terms to remain intact to express what you need to express. And children pick up these words. You'd be surprised the words that I've heard coming from 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds on scientific stuff that is really awesome. And it's just because they've got that curiosity and they want to know. So that all shines through. And I think the more that you put it in a method like you have of music, song, dance, visual components, storytelling, this is creating memory. This is creating real learning that's going to last a lot longer than fact telling or even over compartmentalizing the theoretical understanding of what age we should introduce this or that, just being more with the experience with the child and getting into the rhythm of it. And yeah, they're inspired. Like you guys are up there doing the song and doing the dance and being the heroes for bees. That is very inspirational. And very much what you're doing reminds me of like the wiggles, but not just for silly stuff. So really grateful to you guys. Friends with Honey, check them out, do an incursion, download the album, and get your kids listening to Friends with Honey, because this stuff is really awesome. I ask all of the podcast guests that we come on if you would like to share a wish or a hope or a dream for the future of humanity's children. And if you just both like to share a little something, that'd be really nice.
Yeah, one of the things that we think is really important is being kind, and those little acts of kindness. And that could be creating a nice garden for other creatures, or it could be doing something really nice for your neighbor. But it's those small acts of kindness that are just so important. And we need to be thinking about just being kind people more often.
The theme that runs through as to why we started doing this is almost that same sort of thing. You do things because it's the right thing to do. And, being kind is the right thing to do. Looking after the planet that we all live on is the right thing to do. And, looking after the kids is the right thing to do. So, being kind and doing the right thing. It's as simple as that, really. The world would be so easy if everyone was trying to do that.
Be kind. Everybody out there. No, it's so true. And yeah, there needs to be more kindness and more people doing the right thing and doing the good things, just like the bees do all the good things and they don't stop. And the bees are our role models for their community-minded diligence, their love of flowers and sweet things that they like to collect in beautifully architected homes. So all of the things that we can learn from bees. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you guys. Thank you. All right, Life Rocks listeners, this has been great. Big thanks to Friends with Honey. And if you haven't already, like, subscribe, as you can support our show to keep on getting awesome guests on that come from different angles to share their journey about childhood learning, development, and connecting children to the magic of nature so that we can have healthy, happy future generations. Thank you to everybody. Life Rocks.
Thank you so much for listening to the Life Rocks podcast. If you enjoyed the show, then leave us a review. We'll be back soon with more inspiring content, and in the meantime, remember, life rocks.